Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast. This is your host, Pete Quinones. Adam Patrick from the You're Talking Over Me podcast asked me to come right back on his show after being on a couple weeks ago. He wanted to talk about some of the points of my conversation with Matt Erickson because Adam is right there. He's been asking the same kind of questions we've been asking for a couple years. So we talk about that. We talk about the state of libertarianism. Is libertarianism viable into the future, and especially post-COVID-19? We get into a little religious talk about Matt saying that libertarianism is basically Christianity without Christ. And yeah, this is a long conversation, and it is us trying to figure out the way forward and answer some questions that we know a lot of people are asking themselves. So without any further delay, here is myself on Adam Patrick's You're Talking Over Me podcast.
All right, Pete, thanks for coming on again, man. I very much appreciate it.
Doing well, man. How you doing?
It's been an interesting week, and culminating in your conversation with Matthew Erickson, which I know is dropping before this one will drop. I kind of wanted to not bury the lead here and sort of start by asking you how that went for you and what some of your biggest takeaways were from it.
Well, I think a lot of people who listen to my show know that I have a lot of questions about libertarianism, how it would work in practice, and then looking at the fact that how long the ideology has been around, how long the party has been around, how quickly the party was infiltrated. And basically, when you look at the last 15, 16 months, I mean, I've came to the conclusion last summer, when I started had Curtis Yarvin on my show for the first time, and I started talking to people who are outside of libertarianism. I mean, Curtis would be, I consider him to be a post-libertarian because, I mean, he was a Misesian, Rothbardian at one point, and he just saw past what was going on. Once he read Democracy, the God That Failed, it did to him what it did to me. It made it so that and also reading the Machiavellians and realizing that, like Matt was talking about, no matter what you have, if you have anarchy, if you have Ancapistan, if you have a libertarian society, the elites are going to be in charge. They always will. That's who the people are going to look to. Even if the economy fell apart and everything, I mean, they have the resources, to just take over again, no matter what. And so if the elites are always going to be in charge, which I believe 100%, then libertarianism needs to be rethought. And I don't know that Yarvin has ever used the term post-libertarian, but that's a term that I'm going to start using from now on, and refer to myself as post-libertarian, because I just don't see how it works. I don't see that. I understand it. I think that we could make 80%, maybe 90% of it work in society, but there's always going to be someone in charge, and there's always going to be hierarchy. And that's just what I've come to in the last 15, 16 months. And, it's what I've been trying, conversations that I've had, and people know that I'm hinting at it. And I think that really smart people that understand this, Matt, Stephen, I think yourself, I think you understand it as well. Myself, a couple other people we can think of. I think we need to come together and we need to flesh this out. And I'm not talking about just like do a podcast every week or 2 weeks. I'm talking about we need to privately start talking about exactly what this looks like and what the praxis of it looks like. Because I just don't, the whole idea, I love my LPMC people and everything, but, okay, so you restart the Ron Paul revolution. Okay, so we already had that once. Okay, so what happened to it? A lot of it dissolved. A lot of it went into the Trump, a tiny sliver of it went alt-right and now dissident right. we're going to do that again. And then what's going to happen? We're going to get, maybe we get another 3-4 million people on board. And what happens when nothing changes after 2024 and populism is still on the rise and you start losing people to that? I mean, it just seems like it's a cycle at this point. So I think we desperately need to come up with something that addresses reality and addresses the reality of who humans are, how humans act, human action, and go beyond what's already been taught and what people have already accepted as their theoretical, and let's face it, it's all theoretical, their theoretical framework.
I mean, I've been on about praxis on this show for as long as I've been doing it, which is not super long, but it stems from a place from, a decade or a decade and a half ago where I really had some struggle with libertarian praxis, in that there isn't any. And I would listen to the theory, I would read the theory. I got involved in, the LP back then and started kind of seeing this. And there was a lot of things about it that just rubbed me wrong, but I guess I just wasn't in a place intellectually to put my finger on why or what it was. And it's obviously been through the disaster of the last year and a half that's forced people to confront these ideas. And what it really comes down to is not just practice, but it's something that you and Matt were talking about, and you've touched on your show prior. I've done it here. Matt's done it as well. And that's that religion seems to be inevitable. And I think that just those 3 words, religion is inevitable, if people can follow that logic train all the way to its conclusion, they will see how everything in history is played out in very particular and predictable cycles, and how, the last year and a half has worked out, how the church woke has come to power. You and Matt nailed that on the show. I think and the major conclusion there is that libertarianism is trying to be Christianity without Christ, without God. And then when I was texting back and forth a couple of months ago, I was saying, it doesn't seem like you need libertarianism. It's already in Christianity. It's the same thing. It's just one is some modern update that is, hacked the God part out. So maybe that's kind of where it all sort of started for me. Did you kind of see it the same way?
Well, I remember back when the Soviet Union collapsed, and a few years after that, I was talking to a friend of mine who was much more politically savvy than I was at the time. I mean, I wasn't at the time. I was just like every other schmo out there, pull a lever that feels good and yada, yada. And we were talking about the Soviet Union, and he didn't know, I didn't know that the oligarchs had taken over. And I mean, think about it. The oligarchs took over. What happened? Gee, I mean, communism falls and the elites step in. Imagine that. Unbelievable. And I said, well, why do you think it won't go back to communism? And he just looked at me and goes, because they have freedom of worship now. He goes, they're going to be worshiping who they want, and they're not going to allow communism to come back in and tell them they can't worship who they want. So they have this taste now of of being able to go to the Russian Orthodox Church and worship like they weren't allowed to worship under. I mean, there was a Russian Orthodox Church under the Soviet Union, under communism, but they told them exactly what they were going to say and everything, and it was pointed towards. Conquest has a book, Religion in the Soviet Union, that's really good. And once I realized, they're not going to go back to they won't go back to, if they do go back to some kind of socialism, they're still going to be able to worship. They're not going to lose their religion. And then I started looking at that. And then not too long after that, I started going to church. And I started studying the Bible, and it's all about hierarchy. And it is true that what libertarianism is promoting is like the kingdom of God on earth, where everything is perfect. And, there are some slight imperfections, but the market will take care of that. God will take care of that. If there's anybody, if there's an angel that's getting ready to rebel, God will take care of that. The free market will take care of that. As a free market is God, or it's a sacrament of some sort. And but yeah, as far as and I said that, and I tweeted that out, and I thought it was very funny that I was going to talk. I knew I was going to talk with Matt yesterday, but I didn't. When I was sending out that tweet saying that libertarianism has always had an atheist problem, I didn't realize how important that the conversation was going to center so much around that. And what's funny about that is, when you read like Yarvin, I mean, Yarvin's an atheist. So, I mean, right. He's not, basically what we're doing is we're learning from what he learned and what he started writing about after he abandoned libertarianism. Not all the way. When you read something like Why I'm Not a Libertarian, when he gets to the end, he talks about a corporate government kind of structure. And, it still sounds kind of libertarian. But I think that when he was writing all that stuff, he didn't foresee like the last 15 months, the last 16 months. And, he's already crossed over into clear pill where, it's like, act like you're basically a hostage in a land that's yours, but, there's a foreign power that's taken over, which there has, the government acts as a foreign power, but bringing it back to religion is, and I don't think that you even have to be a theist or a deist in order to understand how important it is that people want to worship. If they're not worshiping God, they're worshiping the state. If they're not worshiping the state, they're worshiping themselves. If they're not worshiping themselves, they're worshiping the idea of liberty of some sort. And people don't realize that they're actually worshiping those things. They don't realize that they're putting that on a pedestal. And I mean, putting something on a pedestal is worshiping. And I think that because libertarianism has always been really synonymous with atheism to a certain extent, especially when you consider like all the great, the great thinkers and everything. Ayn Rand was radically atheist. Rothbard was an atheist. Mises was an atheist. It isn't until you get to when you start coming forward and you start looking at their students that they start, you start seeing Christians and Catholics coming in. But I just don't. We have to talk about exactly what people are worshiping. And I think that libertarians, anarchists need to understand that when you're pointing out that people are worshiping the state, that because, they worship, they just treat the state just like a church. There's something, whatever you desire most when it comes to politics, sociopolitics, whatever, you're worshiping it too. And it's a false idol. And if you don't understand, and we can move on from this, but if you don't understand that there's always going to be hierarchy and you accept that, until you accept that, I mean, there's really no, you're stagnant. You're not moving at all.
Well, what do you think it is about the Ayn Rands and the Rothbards and Miseses of the world that they turned out to be atheists? What do you think? Is there some kind of a collective, is there some trait that you can see in all of them that would lead them to that? Is it just an enlightenment, I don't know, consequence of the Enlightenment and the logical thinking?
Could be a consequence of the Enlightenment. I always found it interesting that some of the most anti-communist people were atheists, considering, I mean, communism always had an atheism problem. They were like, well, you can't worship a god because we need you to worship the state. And they were making people atheists. And then you have, I remember on Facebook before COVID happened, one of my biggest pet peeves were these people who were like all over my Facebook feed, and like every post would be just ripping on anyone who believed in God. And it was just attacking Christians. And I'm like, okay, so you want freedom, yet you're attacking and insulting 80 to 90% of the population. It doesn't seem, even if you are an atheist, it doesn't seem like the smartest thing to do. I mean, Rothbard, I've heard Rothbard lectures where he explains Calvinism better than most Calvinists can. And they won't even like read the Bible. I remember there was this one guy who said that the Bible, oh my God. And when I pointed out how wrong he was, he blocked me. This was on Facebook. He said, oh, so you're going to believe a Bible that was written by a king in 1611?
King James only? But it's such a silly, I don't know that. I don't know what to respond to that.
He literally thinks that the Bible was written by King James in 1611.
Ambitious project.
The biggest selling book of all time, the book that has inspired Western civilization and everything about Western civilization. You want to call yourself educated and you don't know what's in there? I'm sorry. Until you know what is in the Bible, what the Bible teaches, you don't know. You're not educated because you don't understand culture. You don't understand your neighbor. You don't understand why your neighbor believes what they do. And your neighbor may not know the Bible. They just may know what the pastor tells them on Sunday, but they're getting their information from someone who's studying the Bible. If you don't know what's in the Bible, first of all, shut up. Don't talk about it. You're just making assumptions and you look like an idiot. Second of all, go buy one. I mean, I won't tell you what translation. I'll give you, the King James is probably not for most people because most people are idiots nowadays. New King James, try the New King James. It's still a little flowery, but it's not, you're not getting old English. And just start reading. Find a study guide or something like that, and just read it. Read it like a history book and see what's in it. And maybe like listen to some podcasts where people talk about it or something. I mean, how do you live in this culture and not know what the hell's in the Bible?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't get that. And then people want to call themselves like, I'm an intellectual. You don't know what's in the Bible.
Yeah, I have a couple of really good friends who do. I'm not going to call them out on here, so I don't really have permission to. But they're good people. They've both been on the show, and they're very good thinkers. They've kind of gone the James Lindsay route, where they're breaking down in YouTube videos a lot of postmodernism. And I don't necessarily agree with all of their determinations and conclusions, but they've done a lot of work, as has James Lindsay, into this. And it's great that they're putting that much time into it. But they're devout atheists. And they come out of that very much that school. And it's strange that the amount of work, and it's a lot, that people will put into disproving or arguing against postmodernism, and yet their understanding of the Bible is cursory memory from 30 years ago when they went to Catholic school. And when I would call myself an atheist for most of my life, having gone through Catholic school and really not liked it, but not really paid a lot of attention to it. And I took, your advice in retrospect, I suppose, which is, if I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to go and I'm going to study the Bible exegetically, I'm going to do it on the air. I'm going to have a friend of mine come on and we're going to do a series and we're going to go through it and we're going to talk about it in just the way that you laid it out, so that people can sort of, and I can even look back and see my own growth into understanding the process. It's just so strange that so many very intelligent people who have put so much time into breaking down so many cultures and subcultures won't do that. I don't get it. Some do, but so many just don't. I feel like just doing the 6 episodes I've done with my friend Chris on this show, that I can listen to somebody who's got 4 doctorates and a thousand YouTube videos and go, no, that's not right. That's just totally not right. And I shouldn't be able to do that. They should be able to spin circles around me.
Yeah, I find it really interesting when atheists attack postmodernism, because what you always hear about postmodernism is like one sliver of it, which is, oh, how do you know words mean anything, or this language means anything? Well, how do you know language means anything if you're an atheist?
Yeah.
I used to have this guy I went to church with. He used to laugh at atheists. He used to go, if you're an atheist, you just shut up. Nothing coming out of your mouth makes sense. How do we know what it means? How do we know anything that you're saying makes sense? How do we know what morality is? Where does our morality come from? No matter what anybody says, their morality is basically coming from Christianity if they live in the West. And you could, like, I can't remember what the name is, a very famous Christian missionary where they went down to Ecuador to preach to these like tribesmen who had never seen white people before. They had never seen anybody outside of their tribe, and they just immediately killed them all. And the tribe just immediately executed them all. And when they went in there, they ended up sending more people in, and eventually they Christianized this tribe. And when they, like, years later, when they could speak English, and they said, well, why did you do that? Why did you kill them? They said, because they're not us, and they're from the outside, and what's wrong with killing them? And now, now they've learned the Bible, and they're like, yeah, we know that was wrong. I mean, people have this idea that, I don't believe in tabula rasa. I believe that you are born. There are some things that you are inherently born with. I don't know so much about morality. I don't know that. I question that, especially when you look at Bushmen who have never been, who have never been introduced to anything other than their culture. And if they come from a culture of, I could be answering my own question right now, but if they come from a culture where murder is casual, well, then, murder is casual. There's no morality there. But if they came from a culture that had morality and murder was bad, then murder would be bad. But how would they know that murder was bad?
Right.
So,
right. It's like saying that how could atheism exist without something to be atheistic against? How could atheism exist without theism? It has to be in response to something. And so obviously what it is, it's in response to, theism, God, deism, Christianity, whatever. But obviously that they have grown up in a culture that is, like you said, entirely filled with Christian values. So they're taking their morality from that, or it would also be antithetical, but it isn't. It's very congruent. The morality for most atheists, tends to be very much don't hurt people and take their stuff. You don't see them turning into sociopathic people for the most part. So it's strange. It's like we came to the same conclusions. You came to it through logic. I came to it through belief or faith or whatever, or maybe I'm not sure. I'm personally quite entirely there yet. But okay, we're at the same conclusions, but you just deny God. It just seems like a random flip, like light switch flip on. Like, man, I just don't. It doesn't work. But you can't deny the fact that you reaped all of the benefits of the people who were theists before you.
Yeah, it's remarkable. That's why talking to somebody like, I think another person that we can bring into this is like a David Gornowski.
Absolutely.
David Gornowski is a great thinker, and he understands that the problem with libertarianism is the atheist problem. It really is. When I say that, I want to say again, I'm not saying that you actually have to believe, but you have to understand why people do the things they do when it comes to faith, when it comes to wanting to worship. And if you don't understand, if you think it would be very easy for somebody who looks at why people vote, why people put so much faith in government, to go, they're like, oh, I don't know why they do that. Well, I have the answer. Because everyone has this thing inside of them to worship something. And I want to meet the person who says, well, I don't worship anything. I guarantee you, if I can talk to them and ask them questions for 5 minutes, I'll find out exactly what they worship.
Yeah.
Everyone worships something.
It's Pascal's God-shaped hole in man's heart. and you're going to take that wager. I mean, that was kind of the whole idea. And there's so much of that that's applicable that, I'm repeating myself, obviously from other episodes I've done, but this innate need feeling to fill yourself with meaning and purpose is just there. It just seems to be this undeniable fact. And you're pointing to that exact same thing there by saying that people are going to worship something. And if we're moving ourselves to the idea of, dare I say it, engineering liberty, right? It's understanding that human impulse, that need to fill yourself with meaning and purpose, that God-shaped hole, and figuring out how to provide it economically. And that's going to, I don't know if that sounds weird to people, but it makes complete fucking sense to me.
Well, yeah. And I think what Matt's whole thing is, if you're looking at praxis, okay, and you want to, let's just take anarchy away from this whole thing. And I have and you jumped in the conversation that Matt and I were having on Twitter today, and it's really hard for us to stop calling ourselves anarchists, even though we don't really believe that anarchy will ever happen, ever. I don't believe it'll ever happen. I don't care. I don't care that if you would have said in 1850 that in 15 years slavery I don't care. Slavery was a government program. They got rid of a government program. They didn't get rid of the government. Come on, it's a false equivalence. You're not going to have, you can have anarchy maybe in one locale, they'll leave you alone or something like that. Liechtenstein's doing pretty good. It's not anarchy, but they're doing pretty good. Andorra's doing pretty good. These are places I wouldn't mind living and everything. But like this belief that there's going to be this like countrywide or even statewide or even, I don't know, citywide anarchy. I'm sorry. You don't understand human nature. You don't understand humans. You do not understand. You need to read the Bible. Go back. You need to study the Bible. And it's hard because I still call myself an anarchist every once in a while. I still default to it where I'm like, fuck, I'm an anarchist, and I'm like, oh God, did I just say that? Really? It's like, I'm getting that way with libertarian. I can't, it's so hard to get rid of all these labels. And I think really the label that I'm going to really start adopting is post-libertarian. And, it's, maybe even post-Rothbardian, just like we call Bert and I, and we really got it from Bert from Neocon Remover, calling Hoppe a post-Marxist.
I heard that episode. That was good.
Yeah. And really that's where we're at right now. And also, Saul Newman's post-anarchism, where it's like, okay, anarchism it's not a location, it's an experience.
Yeah.
You're experiencing anarchism. And sure, we experience anarchism. Sure. We're also surrounded by a gigantic state that's, keeping other states from invading and everything like that. But, sure, why not? But I think it all goes back to what Matt was talking about. It's like, okay, so if you're going to sell the idea of people going back to, say, like, let's say the Articles of Confederation. Okay, we need to go back to a society that's set on something like the Articles of Confederation. Well, where's your sales pitch? How were you selling this? There's the praxis. Praxis doesn't even have to be something in practice, something you do with your hands. It could be just how you talk. And how you talk to people is, I asked Judge Napolitano, when we were interviewing him for our documentary, one of the questions that didn't make it into the documentary was, if we could live under the Articles of Confederation now, would we have more liberty? And he just ran down this whole list of how we would have more liberty and everything like that. And, well, how do you sell that? And that's all it comes down to. It's that libertarians seem to have been selling this fantasy that nobody can see in reality. So how do we sell them the reality?
It's interesting you bring up I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead. Yeah, man.
You brought up the Articles of Confederation, and that was an argument that I was 100% in that camp until Matt mentioned popular liberty on your show. And I've had him on once on this show. He's going to be on again. I'm going to drop the episode tomorrow. And I've been messaging back and forth because he's got a very Yarbin-esque brain, and it takes me a lot of time to digest information like that because I'm not that intelligent. And he mentioned that in the article, the Constitution actually, I don't want to get into the time preference thing, but his argument was that the Articles of Confederation, yes, it would have led to more liberty, but it also would have led to much more violence because you wouldn't have had, you essentially would have had a bunch of tribal warfare, and the geography of the states didn't really prevent one from invading another. There wasn't really anything that held them together. It's not, I want to say it's a heretical thing to state in our space. And I need to explore it more with him. But his argument, which I'll have up tomorrow, was incredibly interesting. And I don't know how I feel about it, but his point was essentially that the Constitution, while it was designed to limit government, what it did was create a low time preference for power that in the long run ended up creating a much larger government.
Right.
And that part seems to make sense. It's that the Articles of Confederation would have led to, let's say, a Rome-esque 24 civil wars rather than one, was kind of his point. So I'm just throwing it out there. It's not something I have an opinion on yet. I just thought it was an interesting little factoid that he brought up.
Well, yeah, I'd like to talk to him about that too.
Yeah.
Because the South already by that time had a unifying culture. So I would like to talk to him about that. And as bad as I know this sounds, this will be snipped and used and everything. But I mean, the culture of slavery was something that they could, gather around and did eventually. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that, I know that slavery is wrong. I hate that I have to that I have to say that because, there are so many people out there that cannot think without the frame of reference being in Capistan in their head. But that'd be interesting to talk about. But yeah, the whole thing Matt was talking about how if you have a low time preference and you're limiting government, all this behind the scenes, the government's growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's saving up, and it's like it's almost like this vault of power is growing because they're not using it and everything. And then all of a sudden it gets to the point where it's got this much power. It's got so much power that now it can use that power and no one can stop it. And that seems to probably what happened right around 1913 was that all this power had been just built up. And, who's the Marvel one that has a thing in his everything and just boom, everything.
Doctor Strange?
I guess. Yeah.
I don't know.
And then it seems like now you just can't stop it. Now it's runaway. And maybe that's what we need, because if we constantly try, we limit it again, and now, we get it under control again, and then it gets even more power. And maybe some of that power comes in from the outside, comes from outside influences that aren't wouldn't be considered quote unquote the American culture. Or, I don't know. We're literally trying to come up with new things on the fly here.
Yeah. Yep.
We're trying to answer questions that libertarianism is failing. Mm-hmm. It has always failed at. And people don't want to hear that because they think that libertarianism is, it's just real libertarianism hasn't been tried. Okay. Well, I've been trying it for 50 years.
You're right. And I think it's to a lot of people's credit that folks are willing to come on, and do these shows live or, pretty close to live and be vulnerable about our thinking and say, no, I don't quite understand this yet, but let's talk about it. it seems to be received very well. I mean, it isn't when you like to direct, not you specifically, but directly go after the Libertarian Party or something, it's not received very well. But just questioning ideas and sort of pushing things forward and getting this, the more people get on board, it becomes like this gravity to say it's like black hole, this collective mass that starts pulling other people in. You go, oh, well, this person's thinking that and that person's thinking that. Oh, this all of a sudden this person's thinking that and that person has a lot of clout. So maybe we should pay more attention. I think that's going to be very productive when we look back on this time several years from now. And your point about the state maybe getting to the point where it's too big and it needs to be kind of it touches on a lot of accelerationism, which we barely talked about last time, and I'd like to at some point if you're inclined to. But I want to go back to the part about anarchy, because I have the tattoo on my arm, the A. I have behind me a patchwork quilt of an anarchy A that if I had a better camera, you'd be able to see. And that's meant to be ironic based on unqualified reservations. But the one of the things I always said, even when I was calling myself a libertarian, was that I was philosophically anarchist. And it's because I never really, I don't think in my life, understood what it meant to be an anarchist. When somebody says, I am an anarchist, and I said, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? You're an activist, really, I think. And that came from reading Ernst Junger's Oymersville. I think I'm saying that right. It's the first time I've ever said it out loud, but Oymersville, which he develops the concept of the anarch, and the anarch being to anarchism what the monarch is to monarchism. And I didn't put this together until very, very recently, but Curtis Yarvin's idea of clear pill is essentially a reboot of that idea. And it would go along the lines of like a Thoreau or a Kaczynski, where you kind of just leave. You just walk out into the woods and that's it. And that to me makes some sense, but I never understood the ism or the ist part of it. And maybe that's the disconnect and why we find ourselves in this place trying to make sense of this idea. I don't know what you think.
All right. So I've been talking about this goal of doing this full time and doing 4 to 5 episodes a week and throwing in a couple of live streams talking about current events. If you go to freemanbeyondthewall.com/goal, you can see that I'm almost halfway to where I need to be to give you all of that content. So if you love this show and you want to hear more of it, head on over there and help out. Thank you very much. The conversation that Matt and I had, something that I really need to, and not only he and I mean, I think there's 4 or 5 of us right off the top of my head that I want to get into a study group with and talk about like the idea of, he mentioned like, okay, so if you want to influence government, you have to get to the point where you either have wealth, influence, or what's the other thing? Wealth, power, or influence.
Power, influence. Yeah.
If you want to have power, you're going to either have to have wealth to gain power, or the influence to get wealth. You can gain power, or the influence to be allowed into power. Okay, so really, honestly, I mean, I like the idea of agorism. I mean, it's great. It's great if you are going to do the Kaczynski thing, if you're going to do the Thoreau thing, where you're just going to be like, all right, I'm dropping out, nothing. I've come to the conclusion that if you are going to take the political route, you are going to have to gain power. You are going to have to get influence, or you're going to have wealth. I think that Harry Brown's book, How to Live Free in an Unfree World, I mean, he talks about, just getting wealthy. Part of the book is talking about getting wealthy so that you get to the point where, wealthy people in this country do not get treated like poor people do. Where if they come after you, you can pay them off. You can have the best lawyers, you can have everything, things like that. And, but I think that, I don't know that Matt was saying this, but what I was thinking when he was saying it was, all right, if you're going to play politics, you don't play Libertarian Party politics. You go to one of the 2 big boys and you got to start slinging your dick around. And until you do that, I mean, you just have to accept the fact that you are going to be either this ideologically pure person that will be looked up to on social media, or you're going to be somebody like Magnus, who they showed up at his house the other day and went through his house while he wasn't home. You're going to be a target. Or you can gain wealth, influence, and power and start actually changing. You know, it's like the part where Matt and I were talking about public, like government schools. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so, and I asked the question, I said, people are always like, well, if it weren't for the 15,000, I said nature and nurture. Is it right by the nature of people that they worship the government, or is it the 15,000 hours? And he goes, well, who cares?
Yeah.
And really, that's where it comes to. Okay. So, and I think the point he made that was really important was, okay, so if you want to change education, why are you trying to do that on a national scale? Why are you trying to gain the presidency? The president's not going to change education. You need to do that either locally on the state level, or you're going to have to, like the Department of Education or something like that. I mean, you're not going to get a president that's going to. I mean, Trump. Look at all of Trump's people wanted to get rid of the Department of Education. They never got rid of it and anything like that. I mean, it's stuff that powerful people can do locally. Get things changed.
Imagine if Trump had FDR's vision, what he could have done, or maybe vision's not the right word. Yeah, right. There's some sort of will to power or ability to rein it when you to use it when you have it. If he had that kind of dictatorial sort of leadership ability rather than just as a grifter, because he did the first part of what you said, right? He walked in with his fucking dick swinging and just took over the Republican Party and then did absolutely nothing with it. Just let it peter out. So it's like, why would you? But if he had the FDR sort of sensibility of go in there and just be like, all you have to do is just give me all the power and I will fucking fix everything. And then they do that. And then, of course, he just does what he does. But if he did it for our team, that could work. But maybe it can't. Maybe it could only happen that one time. Maybe he was an anomaly and really. But the local part, the municipal stuff, the county stuff, that can always happen. That's always a possibility.
Sure. And also, I think something that Matt was making a point about, talking about the LPMC and the LP, is if you go in there and you do think that you can get some change done, you have the influence to do it, the power to do it, the wealth to do it, and you have the political clout, the political, what's the word I'm looking for? If people owe you something, you have
it's on tip of my tongue.
Yeah, but okay, presenting yourself as an enemy of the system, you're not going to get it done that way. If you go in there with, okay, I really want to change education. I'm here for education reform. That's why I'm here. I'm willing to put up my own money. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to sacrifice my reputation and everything like that. Oh, and by the way, I also want to destroy the system completely. Okay, good luck. Good luck.
There's something very, very un-Machiavellian about the, state to national Libertarian Party apparatus, where there is this sort of, not on the lefty side, but certainly on the Mises Caucus side, what they tend to be is very good human beings, very honest, trustworthy human beings who just very much want to tell you what they're doing because they think it's the right thing to do. And you want to hug them for this, but you also want to slap them upside the head and be like, that's not going to work. And maybe that positive, generous, caring, honest energy is better spent in another place rather than in the political world where people would literally slit your throat to get power. And that's why I don't think it's possible at any level above the local. For example, here in my state, I know many of the guys in the Libertarian Party, Mises is the Libertarian Party in Connecticut, and they're all aligned with this stuff. They all understand hierarchy, religion, order, absolutely willing to work with the Republican Party. I mean, that's why I'm so happy that I'm here. And I feel like I'm probably an anomaly, or this is an anomaly, because you go around the country and you see other Libertarian Party meetings. I'm guessing that my experience here, which is only like 6 months, is probably not the norm around where in your travels. Would that be fair to assume?
I don't know. I was in Lakeland for the Florida meeting, and the Florida meeting seemed to be pretty mixed, but there seemed to be a lot of Mises Caucus people or Mises Caucus adjacent people there. Washington State seemed to be pretty much 100% Mises, not 100% Mises Caucus, but the dominant Mises Caucus. So that's really the only ones that I can speak to. In Georgia here, I mean, we pretty much controlled the convention this year.
Would you say, though, that the Mises Caucus people that you know would be amenable to what we're talking about in this conversation?
Not 100%.
Here they are. Okay.
Not 100%. No, not 100%. But what I will say is this: I think that when you're talking about the Mises Caucus, okay, so I think a lot of people in the Mises Caucus and a lot of the people who have achieved leadership roles and spokesman roles, the loudest cheerleaders will tell you that Trump changed the game. Look at what Trump did. Trump changed the game, yet they won't use Trump tactics. They won't talk like Trump does. They won't use the kind of rhetoric. They don't realize. I mean, I use the kind of rhetoric that Trump uses, and people recognize what I'm doing. They love it. They think it's fantastic when I do it. They cheer when I do it. But then when other people who have taken more leadership roles, I like to stay in the background and do my commentary. But people who have taken these leadership roles, they're, well, we have to be respectable and everything. No, we don't. People are already upset at their whole respectable thing. So if you're going to say Trump did this and he did this because he did this, and then you don't want to copy what he did, well, I mean, okay, well, I mean, you don't have to copy it 100%. You could dial it back to 75%. Something, but I mean, it works. It's what people want to hear. People are so friggin' sick of politics, and those people who are willing to step outside and be pariahs politically, they're not about respectability,
right?
I mean, the ones that are trying to get rid of, who are trying to disaffiliate New Hampshire and the LP in New Hampshire, and trying to get Karen Ann Harlos kicked out of her job. They're about respectability. They're actually real politicians. They're acting like real politicians.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're not.
Yep.
So the only way you possibly have that you're going to just in the party have this influence and this power within the party is to rule by numbers. But once you go beyond that and you go outside the party and you start talking to people who aren't, I mean, because let's face it, what was the whole thing about? We want to bring libertarians into the Libertarian Party. That's what this whole thing was starting in January. We want to bring libertarians into the Libertarian Party. Okay. Say you do that. That's not enough. You're going to need other people inside the Libertarian Party. You're going to need people who call themselves Republicans and a few people who call themselves Democrats or progressives. Who knows? I know progressives that are in the party now, and they're freaking way more red pilled than some of the people I know in the Mises Caucus. Well, how do you do that? How are you planning on doing that? Are you planning on saying end the Fed? Are you planning on saying end the wars? They're attracted to big dick energy. That's what these people have proven to you. That's what they've told you. So if you're going to be politically successful, you're going to have to swing. And if you're not willing to do that, they're not going to want anything to do with you.
There might be two. I agree. I 100% agree with that. And there's also another trend that I'm seeing, and I really try to stay out of this. I mean, I follow some of the people and I watch it, and then I'll talk in the Discord group with a couple of people here in the state about it. A lot of, well, all right, think of it this way. But not everybody listening to this is going to know who Nick Sarwark is. But if you go on his Twitter and you watch the way he tweets, everything is underhanded and passive aggressive. Everything has like 7 meanings behind it. And he's trying to go to this person and that person. It's very well done from the point of view of a politician or somebody trying to gain and wield power. It's very well done. No disrespect to anybody in the Libertarian National Committee, but that is not the case with their Twitter accounts. Their Twitter accounts are long form verbal diarrhea of every single thought that's on their mind at any given moment. And that is incredibly noticeable to me, somebody who doesn't have too much skin in the game here. But if I'm somebody who's looking at, where do I throw my weight in order to get power and wield power? I'm going to be looking toward the more Machiavellian person, even though maybe they're usable, rather than somebody who's just spouting every single thought to gain followers on Twitter. I think that's a marketing and messaging tactic that I think it's being deployed very poorly. I'm not sure if you agree or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you are trying to attract people that are politically savvy, yeah, I mean, you're going to want to get people who consider respectability to be, nice, and, they will appreciate the passive aggressive nature of a Nick Sarwark more than the bombastic kind of delivery of like an LP Kentucky or something like that, or an LP Connecticut, or a Jeremy Kaufman or a LP New Hampshire or something like that. Yeah, but so that raises a question, is so that if you have all these guys in the Mises, associated with the Mises Caucus, who are filled with piss and vinegar, who are just out there, I'm not going to say edgelording. I think they're just trying to get attention, and I have no problem with that. Yeah, really, if somebody were to look at that, then you have to ask the question, okay, sure, they're getting attention, but how are they going to get anything accomplished politically?
Right.
Then,
yes.
And then you have to ask the question that, okay, so if you're not putting that information out there, if you're not tweeting like LP New Hampshire was tweeting, and you don't want them to, now you're just being politicians. And, well, if you're new to this, somebody who's attracted to politicians, wouldn't they want the people who've been politicians longer, the Sarwarks of the world, rather than the people who just came in the last few years? And yeah, there's some things there that people haven't thought about, and that goes towards your goals. Okay, so from what I understand of the Mises Caucus is, nationally, it's to put a message out, and they really want to concentrate locally on politics. All right, well, if you're going to concentrate locally on politics, then maybe the state affiliates doing what they're doing doesn't seem legitimate. Make them seem legitimate, like they're going to show up at meetings and present proposals that are not edgelording, quote unquote. I mean,
yeah.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I do. I actually think I probably didn't. No, I think you're right. And I probably didn't word my question right, because I was trying to be sort of gentle and subtle, not to kind of call anybody out. But I'll just do it because I mean it in good faith, and I'm not trying to be rude to anyone. The shit posting on the accounts, like the state accounts or whatever, or just shit posting in general, is a massively useful tool, and I 100% support that. I'm not the best at that. I kind of have my own way of going about things, but the people who do it well, like Aaron and that crew, that stuff is an art form. I was thinking more about, Josh Smith or Karen Ann Harlow sort of just airing their laundry at every moment they're feeling it on Twitter. That to me just seems like, unless you're trying to direct people to your show or something and you want to grow your show, and that probably should be the way to do it. It seems to me that shows your enemies an internal weakness that you're letting them get to you, because now you're ranting on Twitter about how upset you are. That, or on YouTube videos, or on Google documents that are public for the LNC, where you're just showing your hand. It seems to me to be so the antithesis of Machiavellian, that maybe they don't deserve to be in those positions. And I'm not trying to make that assertion here. I've asked both of those humans to come on and have the conversation with me. I admire both of them. It just seems to me to be an incredibly antithetical tactic if you're trying to do anything of value in the space that you're in.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I never make myself out to be a victim.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't if you make yourself out to be a victim, you just, for lack of a better term, you look like a bitch. I did block somebody the other day, and I said that, I mean, the reason I blocked them was they just bored me. And that's when I block somebody. It's like, if they're not arguing in good faith, or they just bore me, or it's just like, I mean, oh, you're a grifter because you asked for money. Yeah. And it's like, well, I mean, am I going to get money unless I ask for it? I mean, that's like business. Isn't that business 101? Isn't that sales 101? You have to ask for the sale.
Yeah, that kid was pretty bad at the troll. He was pretty bad.
Yeah, you're not going to get it, and then he just like is invoking my age over and over again. And it's like, you really think my age is a detriment? You're a child. You've never done anything that I've ever done. You've never taken out a loan and paid it off. You're a joke and everything. So it's just like, I was just like, every once in a while I'll be like, all right, I'm sorry I had to block this person, but I mean, they're not arguing out of good faith, and I'm sure they're going to take that and run to their other people with 200 followers and brag about how I blocked them, and that's fine and everything like that. But it's just like, I mean, what they call the loser brigade has gotten to the point where they're like, everyone's a grifter. If like, I don't get advertising on my show. There's a reason I don't get advertising on my show. I mean, there's like, look, what respectable company wants to advertise? So I rely on the people who listen to me to support me. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. The value for value model that, that No Agenda podcast talks about. I mean, that's great. If you're getting value for, return value. But, I don't consider that to be crying and airing dirty laundry. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that's weakness when you're complaining about getting attacked and everything like that. I mean, I've been attacked. I remember, and what's funny is we're talking about Matt and Matt Erickson, and Matt Erickson is Jason Stapleton's partner. And Jason Stapleton basically attacked me a few years ago on a podcast.
I remember it.
And I never complained about it. I didn't never. I had other people who like defended me and everything, and I would point out when they defended me. But I mean, I had a couple people on Facebook who came after me, and they're like, well, you deserved it and everything. I'm like, well, why did I deserve it? I was just telling the truth. I was telling the truth as I saw it. His Facebook group at the time was full of warmongering neocons.
Yeah,
it was so it's like, I'm like, I'm just telling the truth. I'm just pointing out the truth. And it even came down to the point where Stapleton like admitted that like I was right, that he liked the way I handled it and everything like that. So, but yeah, I mean, really the whole airing your dirty laundry thing is, I'm one of those people. If you come after me, I'm coming back. I'm going to come back with an attack. And that's the only way that you can survive. And that's also politics.
Yep.
Let's bring this all right back around. If you are going to play politics. Don't mess around this messaging thing. Oh, we're in it for the messaging and everything like that. It's like Matt said, if you can get people on Joe Rogan with your message, you don't need the Libertarian Party. And if you need, and so if you come to the conclusion that you don't need if you're only going to use national elections for messaging, but there are other ways to have messaging. But they're not going to let you on the stage. They're not letting a libertarian on the stage ever again. The friggin' former CIA agent said the libertarians, the former CIA had said included libertarians in like insurrectionists. No libertarian's going to get on a debate stage again. So and if you want to do it locally, you don't need the Libertarian Party to do local politics. You could just put together groups, independent groups that work locally. Yeah, I mean, the more I see of the Libertarian Party, I mean, I was reading somebody sent me a letter from 2008 from Eric Garris. Do you know Eric Garris is?
I don't think so, no.
He basically founded antiwar.com with Justin Raimondo.
Oh, okay. I knew the name. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay.
And it's a letter from 2008 because it was a letter to Angela Keaton from antiwar.com telling her to get out of the Libertarian Party because the Libertarian Party had decided to go all the way right. Remember they brought Bob Barr in as the 2008 presidential candidate who was Bob Barr, deep state, Republican, and he was like, and it's like, well, obviously there is a right takeover of the Libertarian Party. Well, guess what just happened like in the last 4 or 5 years? There was a left takeover of the Libertarian Party where they decided they were going to go all the way left. All right, so this seems to be a pattern where it's going to go right, it's going to go left, and maybe you can take it over and you can make it libertarian again. But then again, you have to ask yourself, what are the goals of doing that? And is the Libertarian Party the best vehicle for those goals? Is a political party the best vehicle for those goals? Especially when you know that if you start doing anything positive, it's going to be infiltrated.
When you look at the sort of the maybe retrenching that it looks like the non-Mises cockeye seem to be doing right now, and how they're kind of pulling back, and it on the outside it might look like, oh, Mises is, other than the LNC, it might look like, oh, Mises is being victorious. And I'm saying, no, man. I'm seeing people pull out and rebrand and work behind the scenes, and I think they're going to come and they're going to infiltrate you. That's how I see it working out. And I think because you're so focused on this kind of glorious victory, like it's a keg party, and we just did like a 30-second stand, that you're not going to see it coming, because yes, they're not very they're very socially awkward human beings that are coming after you, and maybe they wouldn't be people you hang out with, but they are very singularly focused in this one cool little in-group they have. And I would not discount the veracity of which they could come at you, because I don't know if they have anything else to really live for. And whereas you're like normal people living your life with your dogs and your family for the most part, I would be very, very careful of how that attack comes. I think it's going to be way more than people think. Not that it matters in the long run. I mean, I'm blowing this up like this really fucking matters on a national stage, but just for, inside baseball and shit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm way more interested in this point in getting past orthodox libertarianism and or what I would call dogmatic libertarianism, and trying to figure out the way forward. And I mean, I still think that there is a chance to have something resembling liberty, more freedom, more getting out of not decentralization. I think decentralization is the problem. The problem with our government is it's way too decentralized. I mean, if you were think about it,
you're right. Yes, I get what you're saying.
You can't overthrow this government. How would you do it? And you have one branch of government that's like headquartered in one state, another state over here, and everything. And then you have the military overseas waiting to. I mean, I actually believe one of the reasons why so much of the military is overseas is so that they are away from all of this and they can be called back in case of insurrection, a real insurrection, not a January 6th tour of the Capitol. Guided tour.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, what do you do? So, I mean, really, we need a centralization of power.
Yeah.
I mean, we need we need to know who's in charge. And unfortunately, as James Burnham taught us in the Machiavellians, it's always the elites. And the elites are pulling strings. But if the people demanded, okay, so we need to tighten this up and we need to get this thing smaller, and not smaller so that it has necessarily less power, but that we know where all the power is,
Yeah.
then that's a start. Because
it's something like an anarcho covenant, I would imagine, where you have a bunch of small little city states or whatever, but they all have the same kind of a pact. And maybe there is one person, like some king, who rules over them. But that, I mean, I'm just thinking back to like the Book of Judges or something like that, where there's something like this happened before, that maybe there's a parallel where it kind of works. And what you were just talking about, that's about the only thing I could think of is that from history that maybe fits into that line of logic. And that I would appreciate that for sure.
Local town. Your local town. I live in a town of 30,000. The mayor's in charge. There's 12 cop cars. There's a board of idiots. I mean, I know in my hometown where if I wanted to take over, if I wanted to have an insurrection in my hometown, it wouldn't be very hard. I mean, I'm serious, and I'm not calling for it in Minecraft, okay? But if I wanted to have an insurrection in my hometown, it would be very easy. Why? Because I could put together enough people to take over the 30 people that call the shots here.
Yeah.
You're talking about what? 2.2 million federal employees. I mean, what do you do with that? You know, I mean, you can't even cut off the snake's head. Well, where's that? What's a snake's head?
Yeah.
I mean, there is no snake's head, but local. But if something were to be like the local town where the mayor is basically in charge, and then you have his police force, and then you have his board and everything like that, that's it. That's all you have. That would be a great national model. But because it would be, your local town is not decentralized. The leadership's not decentralized. It's not spread out all over the place to a point where you can't get at it.
It's interesting because everybody agrees with that. Like that's the easiest thing to get behind. It's all you do is just go to your local town in Connecticut or Georgia, and it doesn't have to be violent. You just get elected to the school board, and then maybe Connecticut doesn't have county governance, but if there is one, you run for sheriff. And I don't know, you're like me. You've been in the bar and restaurant industry for 16 years, and everybody knows you. You're like, you know what? I'm going to run for treasurer or whatever they call that. It's not treasurer in municipal politics, but whatever they call that. I'd probably win, except it doesn't seem like anyone ever does it. And that just popped into my head now. I'm like, we've agreed on that for how long? And I don't know anyone who's ever done it. And maybe it's because at the end of the day, we don't really want the power. I don't know.
I think it's because we're too busy. And I also think that it has to do with the fact that enough people have been brainwashed into believing that local politics is not where you change anything. It's national politics, where local politics is where you change everything. And Hoppe was been talking about that since 96, 95, 96, that's where everything has to start. If you're going to have 10,000 Liechtensteins in the United States, it all has to start locally. Everything. So yeah, I understand that. But I mean, if you're going to change things on a national level, well, I mean, first of all, good luck. Second of all, you're not going to be able to do it by going in there and saying this whole thing is, a mess. I mean, Thomas Massey, Ron Paul, people like that. And they speak out against the government. They speak out that the government is corrupt, this whole thing is corrupt. I mean, and they never got anything done.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, they
I'm
won't
not,
let them. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, especially if you come right out and you're just like, well, this whole thing is corrupt and I'm here to try and fix it. Well, good luck with that. They know that you think that everything, I mean, who's going to work with you now?
And then when Rand Paul spent all those years trying to, play the game and be mildly Machiavellian, libertarians called him a bitch and a product of the system. And I was like, no, he's doing exactly what, the whole thing gets so frustrating when you're looking at everybody's different take on it.
You can't talk to libertarians or anarchists. I mean, if you do anything politically, the anarchists tell you that you're a statist, and it's like, okay, I don't care what your opinion is. I mean, you're on social media, and well, I mean, not making fun of everybody. There was a time I didn't use my real name, but at least I used like something that looked like a name. It wasn't like geo thing, blah, 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 something. It's like you're an anonymous account. What, I'm taking you seriously? I mean, there are some anonymous accounts I take seriously because they act serious.
Yeah,
because they act like intelligent human beings. But a lot of anonymous accounts are just there to it's like one guy today. I told him, I said, I looked at his profile and it was like Gab and all this, and I'm like, just go back to Gab. Just go back to Gab. I mean, so you can be around the people, you can be around people that you agree with. I'm on Twitter because there are a lot of people on Twitter that don't agree with me, and that's good. That's where you want to be. Echo chambers aren't going to do you anything. I spent enough years in echo chambers. I don't need that anymore. I mean, just doing an episode like this, and I'm going to release this episode on my podcast, and I mean, I know that I've already said enough to piss half the people off that listen. If it wasn't something about religion, it's something about shitting on anarchy or something like that. And, shitting on libertarianism and saying that, libertarianism may be, orthodox libertarianism may be over and we need to look at post-libertarianism and see what we can do with that. But I honestly believe the people who are listening to this are listening to me because they notice that I'm one of the people who is figuring out that the shit doesn't work. And it hasn't worked. And there's been a libertarian party for 50 years, and you can not like that, or you could think the libertarian party is total shit, but it hasn't been able to do anything. And neither has putting forward the message of, libertarianism out there. I mean, really, what's the message? Read this book. Most people aren't going to read. I mean, there has to be something there. We're past it. We're past all of that old stuff, getting on social media and calling people statists because, they're talking about voting in their local election to try and take down a local tax or so. Well, you're justifying the system. You're a child. You're a child. You're making the system seem like it's legitimate. You're a child. I don't have to. Voting doesn't make the fact that there's 320 million people who believe in a government makes it legitimate. I mean,
more so than anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea that people, like what we were talking about in the beginning, that people need to worship something, and people believe that there is authority or hierarchy, which there is. Authority and hierarchy is not a myth. It's not a fantasy. It is very, very real. And the libertarians hate that.
Yeah.
They hate it because once you get to the point where you realize that hierarchy is real and that there are authorities out there that are real and that people take them seriously, that's when people just like lose their shit, especially people who just like have, read Rothbard and read like For a New Liberty. And they're like, well, if we just look at Rothbard lays out what Ancapistan is going to look like, we just have to get there. Well, how are you going to get there?
Yes.
Or you're not a good agorist because you said something good about voting. Or you're not a good agorist because you talk about, you said something positive about the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. And you're arguing politics on social media when you should be planting a garden or doing something else.
Yeah, man. Listen, this is all for nailed it, spot on. And this is all for me at everything that I want to do on this show and everything I want to do in any conversations I have with you or anybody else that's in this space. is always and forevermore going to be focused on praxis. I can't have conversations about shit that I can't do anything with. Like I have read all that stuff, but most of it, some of it, I do understand it. I do. And I can have that conversation. I just don't want to. Like you said, what does it do? How do you get there? What's the plan? If you got point A, you understand point A, you understand point Z. And you have 24 other letters in the middle that nobody wants to fucking discuss. And it's very, very important to do that. And we might not get it right the first time or the 10th time or the 100th time. And maybe we'll be long and gone before somebody figures it out. But this idea that talking about praxis is bothersome to people, fuck those people. If you're listening and praxis bothers you, I don't want you to listen to me. It's just getting in the way. It's noise, right? This is actual honest work that I really feel is important. I do think, sometime in the future from now, people will look back and they will see something really happening here. I wasn't joking when it sounded corny, probably. I wasn't joking when I said it's like all coming together. I do really see that. I do really feel that. And I'm lucky enough to be able to grift onto that because I'm easily the least intelligent of the people in this little thing. And it's just good to see people wanting to do something, just do something, and not, for attention, but to actually get to the end point, to really look at whatever you want to call it. You want to call it Utopiaville or Ancapistan or whatever the fuck it is. How do we get there? Let's do that. That seems to me to be a worthwhile, spending of my energy and time, which I have very little of. So I'm in. I'm totally in. I hope everybody is down with the praxis. That's a long-winded way of saying that.
Well, theory. I like theory. The problem is we need to come up with new theory. We need to come up with new theory. It's not, we can't use the theory that has been dominating libertarianism for 50 years now, 55 years, 60 years, and get where we need to go. That theory is gone. There are still parts of it that we can use, probably overwhelming part, the overwhelming majority of it we can use. I would say 70 to 80% as an influence, as an endpoint, as a perfect. But that whole thing about don't let the enemy of perfect, or what's that phrase?
I'm not good with colloquialisms like that.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that we're at the point where, all right, this doesn't work. You can talk about it all you want. You could talk all you want about how, wait a minute, but it makes so much sense. Sure, it makes a lot of sense, but I've come to actually realize that I think it's utopian. I think that there is, and to go back to what Matt said, libertarianism is Christianity without Christ. And Christianity without Christ doesn't work. There's no power in it. There are a lot of churches in the United States that have like a lot of people showing up to them on Sunday. They're collecting a lot of money, but there's no Christ in those churches. Because if you know your New Testament and you're preaching Christ, he didn't only talk about love, and he talked about how families were going to be driven apart by his teaching, by what he has to say, and that swords were going to be raised, and how there would be war. And that's where we've come to. We have to there has to be, libertarianism is missing something. There is something that is absent. And I've realized it for about a year and a half now. I think Matt's realized it for about a year and a half now too. It sounds like we all came right about the same time. And we were like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. And the great thing about it is, people listen to this and be like, who are these guys? They're challenging Rothbard and Mises, and they immediately run to their appeal to authority fallacy. And, it's like, well, how are these guys saying that won't work when those people were so much smarter than they were?
Well, it's what if Rothbard and Mises were living right now? What if they were in their mid-30s living through, 2019, 2020, and 2021? I mean, I would just ask them that. Do you think they would be writing what they were writing 50, 60, 70 years ago? Or do you think they'd be having this conversation? I mean, hopefully be even a better one, but I think it would be very different.
And I can prove this to you. I can prove to you that they saw changes. Okay. I'm one of those people who used to hate late Rothbard. It's like, oh, what is this? Why are you appealing to this? He was appealing to the time.
Yeah.
He was looking at what was happening in the world. And he's like, okay, how do we get this message out to people when they believe this, and this? And who are our most natural allies? Our most natural allies believe this, and this. Well, maybe we need to sacrifice this part for this. And, Rothbard was always, he was anti-war. And that was like his main thing in the 90s was the Cold War is over. Pat Buchanan's saying, okay, we need to concentrate on the homeland, and we need to not do any empire building. And, now that the Soviet Union's, we don't need to worry about, let's just concentrate here and everything. And Rothbard's like, okay, that's cool. So he's anti-war. He doesn't want an empire. So yeah, he's somebody that I can relate to and everything, even with the shitty economics. I can, let's find some common ground with the people who are being taken seriously at this time. And yeah, he gets shit on for it. And we're going to get shit on for it too. I mean, we're going to get shit on for it because we realize that, come on, think about it. 1992, Soviet Union is dissolving. They were just invaded Iraq a year before. Bill Clinton's coming into office, coming out of the Reagan Bush years and everything like that. Oh, yeah. Now compare it to today. Is it the same world? Are we living in the same world as 1992? No, we're in a vastly different world. We're in a world where what you say can get you fired. What you say outside of your job can get you fired. We also have social media. We also have I have the Telegram app on this phone. I can call anybody anywhere in the world for free. Even in rogue nations, as long as they have I could talk to people in nations, in no nations, everything like that. We have where the right pretty much controlled the culture, not controlled the culture, but probably dominated the culture. In 1992, the left dominates the culture in 2021. We're living in a different world.
I mean, can you imagine Bill Clinton running on a 92 platform now? Oh, my God, he's literally Hitler.
Yeah. Oh, God. What did Matt say? He's like, he said Ben Shapiro would be 100 years ago would be considered an anarchist. And 200 years ago, he'd be considered a witch.
We both laughed at the same time.
Yeah. And it's and he's right. I mean, what, 1991 is what, 30 years ago? It's only 30 years, man. 30 years is nothing. 30 years is snapping your fingers. And we're in a completely different world, completely different country. I mean, you basically have think about conservatism back then and conservatism now. It's completely different. And you're going to keep the same stagnant praxis or approach to libertarianism. No, libertarianism is, I think it's gone. The way it's been presented for 50, 60 years is gone. And I think something new has to come out of it. Something new has to become up. You have to come up with something new. And I can understand people who've been making their living off of libertarianism for a long time not wanting to do that because it is going to threaten their livelihood. So
that happened to Jason. I mean, when Jason rebranded, with after, what, a year or two. I mean, the show got cut probably by 2/3, at least from I think the conversation I had with him. I mean, and he was totally fine with that. He's like, this is fine. I'd rather have people who are on board with what I'm doing. Fuck the rest of this nonsense. These people are lunatics. I want nothing to do with it. And as long as you follow that path, but you're right, that people are going to have to either, I guess, keep doing this or rebrand and figure out some other way. But yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that it's been, at least for 2 years, it's been my MO that I'm willing to think outside the box, and I'm willing to buck against the system. And when I say the system, I'm not even talking about, like the United States system or I'm talking about the system of libertarianism, the dogma of libertarianism. And I have no problem with that. And I mean, COVID changed the game. I mean, we probably should have been thinking way outside the box. I mean, think about how friggin' far Yarvin was ahead of us.
Oh my God.
Mean, he figured this out in 2007.
Yeah.
He figured out in 2007 that this wasn't going to work. And then, so what, somebody who's as brilliant as him 14 years later, we're supposed to say he was wrong. No, he was 100% right. And so now it's like, well, let's go back and read some unqualified reservations. And you look at the dates and you're like, I'm reading stuff from 14 years ago, because he had it figured out then. He figured out where we were headed.
It goes back to the saying, I mean, what's old is new again. And when, I don't know how many, technology might present us with some actual really new ideas novel stuff that no one's ever thought of before. But for the most part, a lot of what we're talking about is, cycles and patterns and history and tradition and culture, and not taking down the fucking fence until you know what it was put there for. And really, it's nothing really super ingenious. It's just understanding that when those ideas are applied, they work well. And when they're not, fucking stuff turns to shit. And that's about as simply as I can put it for the listeners. It's, I came to it logically. I just played around with shit in my head, and I didn't really want to be a Christian or a theist or whatever I am. I wasn't really looking for any of that. I saw, through Pete's show, through learning about Van and other people, looking at the patterns and going, well, there's no way I can ignore this stuff. That all of this makes sense. There's a reason why these things have happened, or why they've held up throughout history, and we've completely ignored them. This culture has completely ignored them, and look at where we are. We're in a disaster zone. With I think Yarvin doesn't swear very much, but he did when he talked about our current government. He's like, it's a fucking mess. It's a fucking mess. And we didn't get there by, following tradition and culture and hierarchy and social order. We ignored all those things, and now here we are. And I'm just as guilty. My 15 years of intellectual laziness that I was working in the restaurant industry, parroting the same fucking libertarian talking points I was since the mid 2000s. And then COVID happened, and I went, fuck, I better catch up. And it's just been this long, what was it?
And then in order to
crocodile mile slide to the end to try to get all this information in my brain and download it. So,
and COVID starts, and in order to catch up, you have to go back to 2007 and start reading stuff.
Seriously. And it was funny because I had read UR back then, and it just didn't compute. Like, right, I don't remember what I thought of it, or I remember reading it and thinking about it like it was a sci-fi novel. That was how I think my brain interpreted it. Like, this is kind of neat. And then, COVID happened. I think you had it, but the first time I heard him on a podcast was on your show. And I went, I know this guy. And I went back and read that shit and went,
there it is.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
Man, I fucking totally missed that. So it's what's old is new again. I think that's going to define a lot of what I'm going to be doing, and we'll see where it goes.
Want to get out of here?
Yes, sir.
These conversations are going to be endless. I mean, I plan on having Matt and Steven on, and then maybe all four of us can get on and do something. And just, this isn't something that's going to be solved overnight. It's not something that's going to be solved anytime soon. I mean, it's going to take a lot of thinking, and it's going to take a lot of strategy, and it's going to take a lot of balls on our part to just buck against people who are going to be like, no, what do you think you're smarter than Rothbard? That's what I love is like, when I started questioning the non-aggression principle as written, as people interpret it. I remember somebody that I know on on Twitter, vague posting. It's every once in a while I'll see somebody post something and I'll go, you could have just tagged me. I know that's about me.
Right. Vague. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, they're vague. Well, they're vague.
I
tweeting.
like that vague posting. I never thought of that term.
Yeah. Well, it came from Facebook. People called it vague booking, where people would do that on Facebook. So they called it vague booking. So I call it vague tweeting. I just adopt whatever platform they're doing it on. And it was like they said something about, if people think they're going to rethink libertarianism, especially the basic tenets, they need to realize who they're questioning. Everything like that. And it was just an appeal to authority. It was like, you're questioning Rothbard, you're questioning Mises, everything like that. And it's like, yeah. I think we should. I think we should question everyone. I think I should be questioned. Anything that comes out of my mouth, it should be questioned. And I have no problem with that, as long as it's an honest inquiry. I have no problem getting into a conversation with somebody, even somebody who's like an anonymous account on Twitter, as long as you're coming at me with honesty. If you're coming at me to attack me and just call me an idiot and everything, and and you can also get into conversations where people are being very polite at first, but just by their second response, that they're just waiting to attack you.
Yeah.
You can see it, you can read it, and it's just like, all right, I'm out. But I mean, this is probably the most important thing that we can figure out, is because 15, 16 months ago, the world changed, the government changed, and people should realize that people changed, or people didn't change. People showed you who they were. The general public, the overwhelming majority of public, showed you that they don't want liberty. They don't want libertarianism. They hate libertarianism. They're actually hostile to it. Okay. So if they're hostile to it, there's two reasons they could be hostile to it. First of all, you're not selling it to them properly. Second of all, it's just in their nature to be hostile to it. Either way, you got to figure something out.
Yeah, I would close on, I think if Rothbard, Mises, Hayek, these good, really great thinkers were still alive, they would probably welcome the discourse. To think that we're in any way shitting on them, it's just questioning it. And unfortunately, they're not still alive to have the conversation. So there's really no other way to do it. In no way am I going to shit on the thinkers that have come before me. It's just, I can't have a conversation with them now. So this is the best I can do. If you want to talk to how well Rothbard took criticism, look at Ayn Rand. So, and somehow they both survived.
And there are some people alive right now who I consider to be still legendary thinkers. And I welcome, I want them to tell me what I'm doing, what I'm getting wrong, or what I'm missing, and correct me, please. Come on. I would love to talk to Hoppe. I would love to sit down and talk. I think that I think Hoppe is probably, most people would say, probably the preeminent living libertarian at this time. But I put Lou Rockwell in there too. Sure. I would love to, maybe I'll drive down to Auburn and talk to Lou and tell him what I'm thinking and have him yell at me. He would never yell because he's too much of a gentleman, but just have him go, what are you and explain to me why I'm stupid. I have no problem with that.
I think of Lou Rockwell as the Albert Pujols of the libertarian community. Like, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the top 10 players, 20 players of all time. And everybody forgets how fucking good he is till you Wikipedia him and look at his numbers. And you're like, holy shit, Albert Pujols is a fucking legend. Yeah. So,
well, all you have to do is you open up Left, Right, in the State by Lou Rockwell, and you read the first page, and you're just like, oh my God, he's one of the greatest libertarians thinkers ever lived. And most people are just like, well, he started the Mises Institute.
He's somebody else who's evolved over the years too, and adapted and changed with the times. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it's an admirable trait. It should never be looked down upon. It's some sort of detriment to somebody's thinking processes. But
all right, man, let's get out of here.
Let's do it.
Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast, Substacks by any means necessary. I'm going to be at Porkfest this week, and I'm actually going to be on a panel talking about documentary filmmaking. And then we're going to be screening my documentary, not my documentary, but our documentary, The Monopoly on Violence there, for people who haven't seen it. And yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. If you've never checked it out, it's about anarchy. But there's a lot in it that, I mean, I think Ryan McMakin makes a lot of sense when he says, talks about what anarchy really is to him is it's just more choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more choices. And really that's what it is. It's more choices.
Well, the Monopoly on Violence documentary had to be made. It had to be made because it addresses a very specific point. And then if there's a jumping off point from there to something else, you couldn't have gotten to that next thing until you dealt with that thing. So I appreciate it. It's a very well done documentary. And I wish I could get up to Porkfest, but I really don't have any excuse. I just want to lay by the pool here for 2 days. So everybody enjoy that.
Sounds good to me, man. I went swimming for the first time last weekend in like a couple of years. And I was like, oh my God,
it's heaven.
I have to start swimming more.
Oh, it's heaven.
Yeah. All right, brother.
All right, man. Cheers.
Take care of yourself. Yep. I want to thank you for tuning into the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast. I want to thank Adam for having me back on. That's it. Be back in a few days with another episode. Take care.